afternoon, everybody. What's happening, everybody, on this Monday? Happy St. Patrick's Day, everybody. March 17th, 2025. My name is Kevin Smith. Thank you all so much for tuning in to Loud Majority Live. We got a jam-packed show for you guys today. We are awaiting the White House press briefing. I spelled it wrong in one of my titles. You'll all have to live with it. You'll all have to live with it. We are awaiting the White House press briefing. I'm sure Carolyn Levitt will be discussing many of the topics that went on over the course of the weekend, from Donald Trump deporting many of the people in Trinidad. Many of those deportations, where there's video of it, and it's pretty wild. As a matter of fact, the president of El Salvador put out many of those videos himself. I'm sure she will be discussing that in great detail. Also, the Houthi-backed rebels in Yemen have been attacking ships all over the Red Sea and the canal over there. I'm sure she'll be talking about that. But another big story that everybody seems to be talking about, is the fact that new polling is out indicating that Democrats have never been less popular, which is interesting considering they're pretty unpopular in most times. We're going to go over all of that before we throw it to the White House press briefing room. Before we get to that, this show is brought to you by Old Glory Bank.
When big banks decide who gets access to America's financial systems and who doesn't, who do you think gets left out? Middle Americans who proudly wave their pro-America values. Cancel culture in banking is corrosive. It limits your participation in a vibrant, free market economy. Fortunately, you can fight back. You now have the opportunity to invest in the bank that's investing in a fair American banking system, one based in freedom. Ownership in Old Glory Bank, the pro-America online bank, is here. Old Glory Bank is a full-service FDIC-insured bank that's the alternative to overreaching, un-American big banks. We stand for privacy, security, and liberty. We stand for freedom, family, faith, and the flag. We stand for all the values you stand for, and for the values big banks can't stand. So help keep banking in the hands of Main Street, not Wall Street. To invest in Old Glory Bank, go to oldglorybank.com.
Guys, support the parallel economy. Head on over to own.oldglorybank.com. That's own.oldglorybank.com. Once again, guys, we are awaiting the White House press briefing right now with Carolyn Levitt. We're going to bring you guys that as soon as it starts, scheduled for 1 o'clock. So here we are. You know what? Let's have a little fun. First, let's pop that live chat up on the screen. I want to say hello to everybody. Hope everybody is going to have a very good St. Patrick's Day today. Hope nobody drives. Let's be smart. Let's be smart out there. Take an Uber. It costs a hell of a lot less than a lawyer. What's going on, everybody? Let's see. Who do we got? Jeanette's in the house. AC Night, guys. Make sure you're hitting that thumbs up button. Share the video out wherever it is you may be watching from. Let's get those numbers up. TD Hodges. Everybody's Irish today. Everyone's Irish today. And just so I have to make sure I say this, because I say it every St. Patrick's Day, to all the Italians out there who go out of your way to remind everyone that St. Patrick was Italian, none of us care. None of us care. Have some Jameson, have some Guinness, and let's move on. Let's move on. Dawn, how are you? Very good stuff. I'm in a lot better mood than I was. I'm in a lot better mood than I was on Friday, I think. A hell of a lot better mood. So let's dive into the news as we await Carolyn Levitt coming up. Democrats are in a world of hurt. Democrats are in an absolute world of hurt, showing their lowest ever recorded approval rating. CNN drops a staggering new poll showing the brutal reality of Democrats' disapproval numbers. Staggering. Things could not be going any worse for the Democrats. CNN's Manu Raju shared a poll on Sunday's Inside Politics. He said shows a brutal reality for how negatively Americans view the Democratic Party, with the favorable-unfavorable rating showing the lowest point in nearly 30 years. According to the CNN poll, now, this is CNN's own poll. The report found that 29% found that Democrats were doing a good job. Here it is.
Good morning. Welcome Inside Politics Sunday. I'm Manu Raju. First up this morning, a brand new exclusive CNN poll that paints a brutal reality for Democrats as they struggle to mount a unified opposition to President Trump. Americans' favorable views of the Democratic Party's brand are at a record low, just 29%. That's compared to 36% for Republicans. It is the lowest ever recorded for Democrats in CNN polling going back more than 30 years. As you can see, the party's numbers dropping a staggering 20 points in just 4 years. The CNN SRSR's poll also found 57% of Democrats and Democratic-leaning voters are more interested in seeing their party leaders stop the GOP agenda, compared to 42% who are more interested in cutting bipartisan deals. It is a big shift from where the party stood at the start of Trump's first term in 2017. Now, this survey was taken before this week's tumultuous battle over funding the government, which resulted in one of the ugliest intra-party Democratic disputes in years, and left many in the party lobbing furious attacks at Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer, who ultimately reversed course and let a GOP bill funding the government become law in order to avert a shutdown. Now a bitter round of finger-pointing is taking shape after Democrats failed to get a single concession from the GOP, despite having their first piece of leverage to fight back against Trump. Now the big question, where does a party in deepening turmoil and in open warfare go from here?
Where do they go from here? And that's a great question, because I honestly don't have the answer to that. I don't have the answer to that because you see what Democrats have done for the last several years is appoint the doomsday scenario. The end is nigh, Trump is Hitler, everything is over, America is finished. And because they have done this end is nigh scenario, now they can't work with him. They can't show any signs of letting up. They can't do that. However, Chuck Schumer just did that. He just gave Donald Trump, Elon Musk, the Doge crew, everything we certainly like. He gave them all a huge win by 9 Democrats advancing with the Republicans to pass their legislation. And the Democratic base is pissed. They're very pissed off. Why? Because the budget was one place where the Democrats actually had some leverage. Being in the minority, the budget is the one place that you can actually make a difference. You actually can throw your weight around a little bit. And Chuck Schumer completely gave that up. He completely gave that up, so much so that some Senate Democrats are beginning to consider, I love this. Are you listening? Please make this happen. Some Democrats are actually considering cutting checks to AOC to primary Chuck Schumer for the Senate. Make it happen. Let it happen. Let it happen. That fight in New York in 2026 will be absolutely hilarious. Moreover, why will this be more important? Why will this be huge in 26? Particularly for my New Yorkers who are watching. It'll be huge because while we are out getting whatever candidate we want elected, whether it's Michael Huller or Bruce Blakeman or Steve McLaughlin or Claudia Tenney, the names have certainly been out there. I'm not picking anyone outright yet. I'm just kidding. I'm picking Bruce Blakeman. But I'm not saying whoever it's going to be. Democrats will then have a primary on their hands that they have to pay into, which will take money away from Governor Hochul and her reelection chances. This would be huge, some might even say huge, for New York Republicans. But more than just the electoral prospects of it, it shows that the Democrats can't be led. And because they can't be led, people like Hakeem Jeffries are certainly showing their inevitable weakness. Look, I don't like Nancy Pelosi, but she was one hell of a politician. The California political machine is no joke, and they don't mess around. Nobody moved in the Democratic Party. Nobody moved in the Democratic Party unless Nancy Pelosi said so. However, you are seeing members of the squad, people like Jasmine Crockett and AOC, many of the more left-leaning Democrats, walk over Hakeem Jeffries. The Democrats have no leader, and because of that, Republicans, we can basically do whatever the hell it is we want. And because they have no leader, people don't know which way to follow. Look, you can disagree with politics of Donald Trump. You could say, I like this, I don't like that. Up, down, sideways, or the other way. However, we all know which way the wind is blowing. And because of that, we are all on the same page here. Because of that, we are all on the same page. It's okay to disagree. Disagreeing is great. The problem is, when it's out in public like that, Democrats end up with even lower approval ratings than they already have. Here was another poll from Quinnipiac that had to be announced on CNN.
I'm a big fan of the oldies, and when it comes to the feelings that Americans, voters at large, and Democrats have, I can't help but think of Chubby Checker. Why is that? Because the question is, how low can you go? Voters' views of Democrats in Congress, the lowest ever approval ratings on record per Quinnipiac University. Look at this. Approve, 21% among all voters. Look at the disapprove level. Holy Toledo, 68% of all voters disapprove of how Democrats are doing in Congress. Now, you might think that is low, and this is the lowest number on your screen here, down at 21%. But I want to bring you over here to how Democratic voters feel, because this is truly unbelievable. Amongst their own party, how do Democratic representatives, senators, how are they viewed? Get this, the plurality disapprove at 49%. More Democrats disapprove of the job that their party is doing in Congress than approve. Get this, only 40% approve. These are truly horrific numbers. They are in the trash bin of history. That is how low these approval ratings are. When you can't even get plurality approval among your own party, you know you're doing something wrong in the eyes of the...
You know you're doing something wrong. And moreover, more polling out suggests, and I love this. This is my favorite poll. All righty, we'll get to that later. Here's Carolyn Levitt.
I see a lot of us are very festive in our green. Peter Ducey, I like it. First today, I want to address the devastating tornadoes and storms that have impacted many states throughout the South and the Midwest. As of this morning, more than 40 innocent lives have been lost, and many communities have been totally destroyed. The president has been actively monitoring the situation, and the Trump administration is engaged with governors and local officials to restore affected communities and livelihoods. Everyone impacted is in our prayers, and President Trump is fully prepared to assist state and local officials as they recover from the horrific damage. The president has had a very busy weekend, making our country and the world a much safer place. President Trump ordered decisive military action against the Houthi terrorists in Yemen. These Houthi terrorists have engaged in piracy, violence, and terrorism against American ships for years under the Biden administration, costing billions of dollars and putting innocent lives at risk. Joe Biden's pathetic weakness invited these unacceptable attacks. But there's a new sheriff in town, and his name is Donald Trump. And the world is officially on notice. America has a commander-in-chief whose peace-through-strength approach is unwavering and should not be tested. As the president said, no terrorist force will stop American commercial and naval vessels from freely sailing throughout the world. Houthi terrorists and their Iranian backers should not cross President Trump again, and the president has made that clear today. On another important matter, President Trump signed a proclamation invoking the Alien Enemies Act regarding the invasion of the United States by the foreign terrorist organization Tren de Aragua. At the president's direction, the Department of Homeland Security carried out a counter-terrorism operation deporting nearly 200 violent Tren de Aragua terrorists, which will save countless American lives. Thanks to the great work of the Department of State, these heinous monsters were extracted and removed to El Salvador, where they will no longer be able to pose any threats to the American public. Tren de Aragua is one of the most ruthless terrorist gangs in the world, and they are responsible for some of the most heinous crimes that have occurred in our nation's history in recent years, including the savage murders of beautiful Laken Riley and Jocelyn Nungray. President Trump promised Laken and Jocelyn's families during his campaign that he would demand justice for their beautiful girls, and that's exactly what he did. As the president acknowledged during his inaugural address on January 20th, he pledged to invoke this act. and he has no higher responsibility than to defend our country from threats and invasions. President Trump will continue his historic efforts to seal the border and prevent these illegal invaders from coming here in the first place. As the New York Times is acknowledged over the weekend, President Trump's policies are working. Here's how the Times summed it up. Illegal crossings at the U.S.-Mexico border are down to their lowest level in decades. Once crowded migrant shelters are empty. Instead of heading north, people stranded in Mexico are starting to return home in bigger numbers. The border is almost unrecognizable from just a couple of years ago, when hundreds of thousands of people from around the world were crossing into the United States every month in scenes of chaos and upheaval. This is the Trump effect in action. And again, those are the words from the New York Times. We didn't need a border security bill. We just needed President Trump. All of these actions taken together are contributing to a wave of optimism about the direction of our great country. According to brand new polling from NBC News, more registered voters say the United States is heading in the right direction than at any point since early 2004. Americans support President Trump's common sense approach that's getting our country back on track in record time. Meanwhile, the president's critics can't say the same. That same new NBC poll also found that the Democrat Party has reached an all-time low in popularity. It turns out when you let your hatred of President Trump get in the way of doing what is best for America, the people reject you. Who would have thought? Joining us today in our new media seat is Kelly Meyer. She is a White House correspondent with News Nation. News Nation started in 2021 and is one of America's fastest growing cable news networks with a focus on news for all of America. It's part of a larger ecosystem, Nexstar, which is home to News Nation, the political website The Hill, the broadcast network The CW, and local Nexstar stations. With that, kick us off, please, Kelly.
Thank you, Caroline. What do you say to Americans who want safe streets but are concerned due process is being violated?
The president is using every lever of his executive authority and his constitutional authority within the bounds of the immigration laws of our country to ensure that our streets are safer for law-abiding American citizens. And this administration is focused on detaining, arresting, and deporting illegal criminal aliens. And as you saw this past weekend, the president used his authority under the Alien Enemies Act to deport foreign terrorists. Tren de Aragua is now a designated foreign terrorist organization. And as I said, there were nearly 200 Tren de Aragua members who were sent to El Salvador this weekend. Countless lives will be saved because of this action. And if you talk to the families, the Angel families, as I mentioned, Laken Riley and Jocelyn Nungray, they understand the grave cost of life at the hands of these illegal terrorists. And the president is proud to deliver on that promise for them.
And just to follow up on that, this will be challenged later today in the courts. Does the president, does this allow him to defy the court order without having this the checks and balances and the separation of power?
No. In fact, this administration acted within the confines of the law, again, within the president's constitutional authority and under the authority granted to him under the Alien Enemies Act. We are quite confident in that, and we are wholly confident that we are going to win this case in court. Peter.
Thank you, Caroline. If you guys can't send 200 Tren de Aragua terrorists at a time to El Salvador, where are you going to send them instead?
It's a very good question. You'd have to ask the courts and the people on the left who are trying to fight this administration for doing the business that this president sought out to do, which is to deport these foreign terrorists. And we're very grateful to President Bukele and to El Salvador for accepting these heinous monsters where they will face justice.
And if these guys are terrorists at war with the United States, is President Trump considering anything more lethal to address them than just sticking them on a plane somewhere else?
Well, it sounded like you had a little bit of curiosity in the premise of your question, so I want to address it. These are designated foreign terrorists. The president signed a proclamation on February 20th, 2025, designating TDA as a foreign terrorist organization that was in consultation with the Attorney General and the Secretary of Treasury. That was pursuant to 8 U.S. Code 1189. The president has the right to do that. And I think nobody would argue that Tren de Aragua should be designated a foreign terrorist organization. If you want to have that argument, I'm happy to do it. These are heinous monsters, rapists, murderers, kidnappers, sexual assaulters, predators who have no right to be in this country, and they must be held accountable.
And something different. There is now a member of the European Parliament from France who does not think the U.S. represents the values of the Statue of Liberty anymore. They want the Statue of Liberty back. So is President Trump going to send the Statue of Liberty back to France?
Absolutely not. And my advice to that unnamed low-level French politician would be to remind them that it's only because of the United States of America that the French are not speaking German right now. So they should be very grateful to our great country.
Oh, shit!
Is the administration prepared to give the court what it wants in terms of the time of the flights that departed, that went to El Salvador, and some of those details that the judge is asking for in trying to determine the timing? Clearly, the 5 named individuals were not deported
That's
in
right.
compliance. But looking more broadly, wanting to know about the timing of flights and so forth, because the verbal order did say turn around the flights if there's an issue. So is the administration prepared to provide that information?
I'm prepared to provide it right now. All of the planes that were subject to the written order, the judge's written order, took off before the order was entered in the courtroom on Saturday. And the administration will, of course, be happily answering all of those questions that the judge poses in court later today.
And for people who have due process questions about making certain that there wasn't anyone who was swept up who did not meet the criteria that you laid out, is there a way for the administration to provide more detail about how that was determined, who the individuals were that met this deportation order?
Yes, I can assure the American people that Customs and Border Patrol and ICE and the Department of Homeland Security are sure about the identities of the individuals who were on these planes and the threat that they pose to our homeland. They take this incredibly seriously. They are putting their lives on the line to deport these designated terrorists from our country, and they should be trusted to do that. And that's exactly what the American people elected this president to do.
Thanks, Caroline. Just to follow up on that, then, so you're saying definitively that the administration can prove everyone that was put on those flights to El Salvador was either a member of Tren de Aragua, MS-13, or some other entity?
We've already provided the breakdown in the effort of transparency about the 261 illegal aliens who were deported. 137 of those were deported under the Alien Enemies Act. 101 of those were Venezuelans removed via Title VIII, which, as you know, are just regular immigration proceedings. And 23 of them were MS-13 Salvadorian gang members. There were also 2 MS-13 ringleaders as part of that group of 23 who President Bukele particularly expressed his gratitude for their return so he can demand justice in his home country. Jennifer.
What criteria, though, other than, say, tattoos or maybe being in the wrong place at the wrong time, are they using to determine that someone is actually a member of one of these organizations?
Intelligence and the men and women on the ground in the interior of our country who are finally being allowed to do their jobs. Their hands were tied under the previous administration, and as I said, they take their jobs very seriously. They should be trusted and respected by the American public with this operation. And of course, as I said to Kelly, the administration will provide all details to the questions that the court poses. Jennifer.
One more follow-up on that. Can you say how much the U.S. is paying El Salvador to imprison these Venezuelans? And then a different question on Russia. I was wondering if you could give us an update on the ceasefire negotiations, and is there anything you can share on the list that Putin passed along to President Trump for the things he's requesting?
Sure. To your first question, it was approximately $6 million to El Salvador for the detention of these foreign terrorists. And I would point out that is pennies on the dollar in comparison to the cost of life and the cost it would impose on the American taxpayer to house these terrorists in maximum security prisons here in the United States of America. And I would echo the message of our Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, who expressed his gratitude to President Bukele and El Salvador's government for their cooperation in this deal. As for Russia, as you know, the president announced last night on Air Force One on his return from his very busy weekend in Florida that he will be speaking to President Putin tomorrow. I won't get ahead of those negotiations, but I can say we are on the 10th yard line of peace, and we've never been closer to a peace deal than we are in this moment. And the president, as you know, is determined to get one done.
John?
Sure, Caitlin.
I have two questions for you. One on the flights, but first on the president's post overnight, saying that the pardons that were issued by President Biden preemptively to members of the January 6th committee, that they're now null and void. Have attorneys here at the White House told President Trump that he has the legal authority to undo a pardon simply because it was signed by auto pen, as he said?
The president was begging the question that I think a lot of journalists in this room should be asking about whether or not the former president of the United States, who I think we can all finally agree was cognitively impaired. I know it took people some time to finally admit that, but we all know that to be true, as evidenced by his disastrous debate performance against President Trump during the campaign. I digress on that. But the president was raising the point that did the president even know about these pardons? Was his legal signature used without his consent or knowledge? And that's not just the president or me raising those questions, Caitlin. According to the New York Post, there are Biden officials from the previous White House who raised those questions and wondered if the president was even consulted about his legally binding signature being signed onto documents. And so I think it's a question that everybody in this room should be looking into, because certainly that would propose perhaps criminal or illegal behavior if staff members were signing the President of the United States autograph without his consent.
Biden is on the record talking about issuing preemptive pardons to these people.
But was he aware of his signature being used on every single pardon? That's a question you should ask the Biden White House.
Is there any evidence on that he wasn't aware of it?
You're a reporter. You should find out.
Okay,
Sean.
on the flights, so I have a question on the timeline of the flights. You keep talking about the judge's written order, which hit the docket Saturday night at about 7:26 p.m. But he issued a verbal order before that at about 6:45 and 6:48 p.m. based on the court hearing. A verbal order from the bench. Does the White House feel the need to comply with a verbal order from this judge?
Again, as I said, all of the planes subject to the written order of this judge departed U.S. soil, U.S. territory before the judge's written order.
But what about the verbal order, which of course carries the same legal weight as a written order, and said for the planes to turn around if they were
Well,
in the air?
there's actually questions about whether a verbal order carries the same weight as a legal order, as a written order, and our lawyers are determined to ask and answer those questions in court. Sean.
Hey, so on Friday, the president suggested at length that it should be illegal to criticize judges, but he has repeatedly criticized judges who rule against him, and Elon Musk is calling for impeachment of judges who have opposed the administration. So how are those two things not in conflict?
I have not heard the president talk about impeaching judges. I know you mentioned Mr. Musk's tweet, but I have not heard the president of the United States ask that. Mary.
Hey, thanks, Caroline. I wanted to ask about this video I saw this morning set to the tune of, I believe, Closing Time, about deportations of illegal migrants. What's the strategy behind the White House's videos they've been putting out on this, and can you kind of talk us through the thinking on these videos?
Sure. I think the White House and our entire government clearly is leaning into the message of this president. And we are unafraid to double down and to take responsibility and ownership of the serious decisions that are being made. The president was elected with an overwhelming mandate to launch the largest mass deportation campaign in American history, and that's exactly what he is doing. And to this very day, we are now, I think, 56 or 7 days into the administration by my count. The president still receives an overwhelming public support for the policies that he is enacting. So we are unafraid to message effectively what the president is doing on a daily basis to make our communities safer. And the specific video you referenced, I think it sums up our immigration policy pretty well. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. Go ahead.
Thanks, Caroline. I have two questions. First, will President Trump put sanctions on Russia if the talks on Tuesday don't go as hoped? And secondly, have any illegal immigrants self-deported through CBP Home yet?
To your first question, it's something the president has floated, and certainly he's willing to do if necessary. I don't have anything to read out, and I would never get ahead of the president on such a serious decision. To your second question about the CBP Home app, I would have to check in with the Department of Homeland Security, but it's a great question, and we're very proud to repurpose this app, which the Biden administration abused to facilitate the mass illegal entry of illegal immigrants into our country. It was like a fast pass at Disneyland. That's not happening under this administration. We are encouraging illegal immigrants to actively self-deport to maybe save themselves from being in one of these fun videos.
Caroline.
Sure. John, good to
Thank
see you.
After President Trump strafe-bombed the Houthis yesterday, he said that if they retaliate, he was going to personally hold Iran accountable for that. Holding them accountable, what would that look like?
Well, I would defer you to what the president put out this morning, John, where he said very clearly, I will read it, "Let nobody be fooled. The hundreds of attacks being made by Houthi, the sinister mobsters and thugs based in Yemen, who are hated by the Yemeni people, are all created by Iran. Any further attack or retaliation by the Houthis will be met with great force, and there is no guarantee that the force will stop there. Iran has played the innocent victim of rogue terrorists from which they've lost control, but they haven't lost control. They are dictating every move, giving them the weapons, supplying them with money and highly sophisticated military equipment, and even so-called intelligence. Every shot fired by the Houthis will be looked upon from this point forward as being a shot fired from the weapons and leadership of Iran. And Iran will be held responsible and suffer the consequences, and those consequences will be dire." That is a statement from the President of the United States just moments ago. I have nothing additional to share, but our message to Iran is you better take this president seriously, and I think the Houthis learned that the hard way this past weekend. As I said in my opening remarks, there's a new sheriff in town, and this president is not just going to sit on his hands and allow terrorists to launch attacks on commercial vessels and U.S. naval ships. Those actions will not be tolerated. Sure, Edward.
Yeah, thanks. Caroline, on the economy. So after mostly a down week last week in the economy, you've been very vocal, as well as other cabinet members, about how we're in a transition and about how this economic transition, and there's a plan, a long-term plan for tariffs on this. How concerned is the president that the markets and Americans, for lack of a better term, will freak out over these tariffs and be concerned about a long-term plan?
Sure. I think I've been asked this question and answered this question respectfully, Edward. We are in a period of transition. The president has made that clear. He also has made his belief in tariffs and what they will do for our great country clear, restoring wealth back to our country. And if you look at the president's first-term economic formula, massive deregulation, tax cuts, lowering the cost of living with an energy boom, which the American people can expect soon. Wall Street and Main Street should both be assured by what President Trump did in his first term. It's the exact same formula. In fact, I would argue it's even better this time around. And if you look at some of the economic indicators in the last week, the latest CPI report last week beat expectations. Inflation is cooling. Core inflation dropped for the first time in 4 months. The national average of the price of gas is down 42 cents from 1 year ago. And there was also a new report out this morning about wholesale egg prices. They continue to fall. A dozen eggs are now $3.10 cheaper since January 24th. First, that's a 47% decrease overall. So I think the American people do have great reason to be optimistic about this economy. And as I've said repeatedly, it continues to be true. The administration has a whole of government effort to fix the economic mess created by Biden.
So the president's pointed to that April 2nd tariff deadline, so to speak. Is the tariff back and forth sort of done now? We're just all looking towards April 2nd?
Well, I think the president would tell you that all options are always on the table, and he's always ready to respond if he feels the United States is being unfairly treated by our allies and also our competitors around the world. But yes, the April 2nd day is a big day for the country, as the president has said. Reciprocal tariffs will go into effect. We'll have more details on that as the date nears, but our entire trade team, Secretary Lutnick, Secretary Bessent, the vice president has been quite involved in these talks and discussions as well about what that will look like. And the president, as you always do, you will hear from him directly on it. Deborah Saunders, how are you?
Fine. How are you doing?
Good, thanks.
Former pardon attorney Elizabeth Boyer believes she was fired for refusing to sign off on a move to restore gun rights to actor Mel Gibson. DOJ's Todd Blanche says no. But I want to know, is the administration dedicated to restoring gun rights to felons who served their times? I ask this because I've talked to people who were pardoned. They felt that was important. Of course, this isn't necessarily for a pardon. What is the president's thinking on this issue?
Sure.
After you've served your sentence, should you have gun rights?
It's an important question. It is one I have not spoken to the president about on his views, but I will take it to him this afternoon. I will tell him you asked, and we will get you an answer. You're welcome. Jonathan.
Thanks a lot, Carolina. A question for you regarding the administration complying with judges' orders. I want to ask about an administration spokesperson who's the border czar, Tom Homan. He was on Fox News.
We love Tom Homan.
And he was talking about the deportations, and he said the following. He said, "We're not stopping. I don't care what the judges think," which seems to me, just reading that, that you don't care what orders come from the federal bench. Is that the case? Can you clarify that, please?
Well, I think since you just quoted Tom, I'll quote Tom. He said, "I don't care what the judges think, but I can assure you that the administration is complying with the court order. And as I've said repeatedly from this podium, all of the flights that were subject to the judge's written order departed before the written order, and we are prepared to make that case in court later this afternoon." Reagan.
And then if I could, on Russia, the president, as you pointed out, Caroline, made some remarks on Air Force One coming back from Florida, and he seemed to indicate that the conversation tomorrow concerns essentially dividing up assets, dividing up territory associated with the war in Ukraine. Has President Zelensky given President Trump that authority? Is that what is going to take place tomorrow?
Well, as you know, the president and his entire national security team have been engaged directly with President Zelensky and the Ukrainian team, and that has been part of the discussion between the president's team and the Ukrainians. As for where those lines will be drawn or any specifics, I am not going to get into that from this podium. It would be unwise for me to get ahead of the president's call with President Putin tomorrow. But again, I can assure you, in the effort of transparency, as this president always does, you will hear from him or one of us directly after that phone call tomorrow. Reagan.
Thank you, Caroline. There's a lot of focus on the judicial branch right now. The president has about 40 judicial appointments that he could make at this moment. Do you have an update on what the timeline would look like for those judicial appointments? And does the president have a list of potential nominees that he's vetting?
I do not have an update on a timeline, nor do I have a list, but I can certainly have our team gather that for you and provide it. You're welcome. Sure. Go ahead. Sure.
Thank you, Caroline.
Go
So
ahead.
the president is visiting the Kennedy Center this afternoon to
He
attend
is.
a board meeting. A question about what happened a few weeks ago. The Kennedy Center got bomb threats targeting a performance by Shingun Performing Arts, which is an American company showcasing China before communism. This company has been targeted, unfortunately, by the CCP for years. I'm wondering if this administration has a response to this, and also as the president is putting an emphasis on arts and culture, what's the administration's message to potentially foreign state actors who are trying to disrupt that in the U.S.?
Don't disrupt it. This administration will take that very seriously and hold you accountable. We obviously condemn any violence or threats of violence against American institutions. And the president will be traveling to the Kennedy Center later this afternoon. I look forward to going with him. As you know, he is now the chairman of the board of the Kennedy Center, where he hopes to restore arts and culture that embrace American tradition, don't disparage it, as we have unfortunately seen over the past several years. The president will be doing a tour of the center. In his business developer mind, I'm sure he will make some recommendations on how the center itself can be improved, but also will be discussing perhaps some future plays and musicals and theatrical programs that the center will be hosting under his new leadership and the board's new leadership. Daniel.
Will the president be discussing with Putin tomorrow the future of Volodymyr Zelensky? Sort of a follow-up to John's question.
Again, I've been asked and answered this question now. I'm not going to get ahead of the president's discussion tomorrow, but after the phone call takes place, I can certainly provide a readout. Daniel.
Caroline, thank you so much. You mentioned earlier in the briefing that you guys are at the 10-yard line of peace. Given the amount of progress that you've made in such a short amount of time, is that an indictment of the previous administration's foreign policy stance, and is it just more proof that you need to talk to people to sort of get things done?
I think so. I think the previous administration is the reason this war began. As President Trump often says, this war would have never started if he were still in office. It only started because of the incompetence and the weakness of the previous administration. And President Trump is very proud of the progress that he and his team have made in such a short amount of time. And hopefully tomorrow that progress will move forward. Sure.
Thanks. There have been some media reports just in the last few hours that the administration has decided to withdraw from the International Center for the Prosecution of the Crime of Aggression against Ukraine, which is designed to hold Putin accountable for war crimes. Are you able to confirm that? And if that has occurred, why has that occurred?
I'm not able to confirm it because I have not heard that. I will caution, I know there have been many inaccurate and misleading reports from Reuters lately, so I would caution anybody taking that seriously, but I can check in and get back to you. Rachel.
Thanks, Caroline. Is it the president's belief that the Justice Department should be investigating members of the January 6th Select Committee? Is he directing the DOJ to do that?
As the president made it very clear in his address on Friday, I believe some of you were there, I was there, he made his vision for what he would like to see of the Department of Justice very clear, but he said that he has appointed great people in Attorney General Pam Bondi and also in our FBI Director Kash Patel to do what they think is best for our justice system and to stop the weaponization of justice that we saw under the previous administration against not just President Trump but his supporters as well. We want to restore the Department of Justice to an institution that focuses on fighting law and order and crime and putting real criminals behind bars, not targeting Americans because of their religion or their political speech. We saw that under the previous administration and it's unacceptable to this president.
And just to follow up really quickly on just Homan's comments from earlier, a few weeks ago in the Oval Office, the president said he will always abide by the courts. We heard what Tom Homan said earlier today. So I'm only asking just to be clear for the American people. It is the administration's belief that they will that you feel like you are bound to comply by the judge's orders?
We are complying with the judge's orders.
Question on the storm.
Sure.
What role does the president see for FEMA with these storms? He's talking about getting rid of FEMA, states handling their own disasters. Does he plan to change how the federal government responds to these storms?
There hasn't been a change yet. That doesn't mean there couldn't be in the future. But as of right now, the president, the entire administration are actively monitoring the storms, as I said. In fact, before I came down here, there was an email note in my inbox from the Department of Homeland Security on what they are actually doing state by state across the board. So rest assured, Secretary Noem and her team is on it, and I would defer you to the Department of Homeland Security for any further details.
One more question. The president referenced power plants with a conversation with Vladimir Putin. What is he referring to with power plants? What is that?
There's a power plant that is on the border of Russia and Ukraine that was up for discussion with the Ukrainians, and he will address it in his call with Putin tomorrow.
The nuclear plant.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Caroline?
Do you have a question?
Yes.
Okay.
I wanted to ask you if you would be releasing more granular data about the people who were sent to El Salvador this week. Particularly, will you be releasing their names?
I don't believe so because of the privacy concerns at this point in time. That doesn't mean we won't eventually. I would defer you to the Department of Homeland Security for more details on the individuals on the flights, but we have been incredibly transparent in giving you the breakdown of the numbers and also some of the crimes committed by these heinous criminals and individuals: kidnapping, sexual abuse of a child, robbery, aggravated assault on a police officer. I would remind everybody in this room that Tren de Aragua is a foreign terrorist organization operating within the United States of America because the previous administration allowed them to invade our country. These are monsters who tortured, raped, and murdered a 12-year-old Jocelyn Nungre. They murdered 22-year-old nursing student Laken Riley. They led a multi-state sex trafficking operation involving smuggling women into the United States, holding them in stash houses in Louisiana, Florida, New Jersey, Texas, and Virginia, and forcing them into prostitution. They kidnapped and murdered a 33-year-old woman in Texas. They sexually and physically assaulted a woman and her daughter in Wisconsin. They conducted a mass shooting in Illinois. They peddled untraceable ghost guns across New York City, took over an Aurora, Colorado apartment complex where they kidnapped and tortured victims. And by the way, many of you in the mainstream media said that didn't happen. It turned out that it did. And because of the effective immigration policies of this administration, those foreign terrorists were detained and they are no longer operating on American soil, and we have President Trump to thank for that. We'll see you guys later at the Kennedy Center. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Caroline.
All right.
I'm a big fan of the oldies.
Well, that happened. First off, got to be clear, Carolyn Levitt, savage, absolute savage. The question about the Statue of Liberty was certainly a little on the nose. Some might say that was a little on the nose. But look, is she wrong? Is she wrong? I don't think she is. I don't think she is. And the part of it that I found to be so incredible was how many people in the media seem to be very, very upset, more upset at the possibility of Trump violating a court order than they are with the invasion of our country by a foreign terrorist organization. Pretty wild stuff. But you know what? It's par for the course. It's par for the course, and I don't think anybody here is actually surprised. Sorry, I kind of freaked out when she said that because that was, I didn't see that coming. I did not see that coming. Before we keep rocking and rolling here today, guys, hit the thumbs up button. 1,500 live. I think we should definitely get to 400 rumbles today. What are we doing here? What are we doing here, guys? Hit the thumbs up button. No, he's not speaking now. I don't believe so. Guys, do me a favor. Hit the thumbs up button. Share the video out all over the place. Also, do me a favor and head on over to lfatv.us. That's lfatv.us. Guys, this is user-generated content, and we can't do this without your support. So consider becoming a monthly donor over here at lfatv.us. The best way to do that is by heading over to the website. Also, your Rumble rants, always very much appreciated. You guys know we don't take any of your Rumble rants for granted. We know times are tough right now. Guys, head on over to lfatv.us. That's lfatv.us. Yeah, just the fact that we have to remind people that Tren Aragua is a terrorist organization is pretty shocking to me. The amount of people online who have been more upset with the removal of terrorists than they were with the arrival of terrorists is something that I got to be honest, even I find to be a bit shocking. And I don't find much shocking anymore. I don't find the way the Democrats operate themselves, the way they conduct themselves, to be I'm not shocked by it almost ever, but people seem to be far more upset with how these people are being removed than why they were brought here in the first damn place, which is probably why we started off the show today talking about how Democrats are seeing their lowest approval ratings ever, because they just don't have the pulse of the American people right now. They just don't. They don't know which way is up. They don't know which way is down. So, guys, once again, do me a favor. Hit the thumbs up button. Share the video out all over the place. We'll be back in 1 second. Mike Lindell.
I'm excited to announce that we're having our first ever mega sale on overstock clearance and brand new products. For example, save over 50% on this season's flannel sheets. Queen size only $59.98. Kings only $69.98. They sell out fast every year, so order now. Save 20% on our brand new My Crosses. They're designed in the likeness of the one I've worn every day for over 20 years. They come in men's and women's, and they're made right here in the USA. Get our 2025 six-piece My Towel sets for only $29.98. Our initial quantities are extremely low, so get them now before they go. And our best-selling standard My Pillows, just $14.98. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use this promo code to take advantage of our first ever mega sale. But wait, remember that $75 free shipping rule? Well, that ship is sailed, because right now, every order ships absolutely free.
Guys, head on over to mypillow.com, promo code LOUD. That's mypillow.com, promo code LOUD for up to 80% off everything on the website. Check out Mike's mega sale going on right now. That's mypillow.com, promo code LOUD. And as I've said repeatedly today and over the last several weeks, now is the time. Now is the time for Republicans to put the pedal to the metal, to get what we want, to extract from these Democrats everything that we have wanted for quite some time. But why am I saying that? Why am I saying that? I'm saying it because now the Democrats have no leader. They're all over the place. They don't know which way is up. Because of that, we can basically do whatever we want. We can get the Doge cuts that we want. We can get tax cuts. We can appoint more judges. We can do all the things that Republicans have claimed they wanted to do for quite some time, because there's effectively no opposition to stop us. But right before the press briefing, I was talking about a poll that came out recently that showed that 36% of Republicans now identify as MAGA. 36%. now identify as part of the Make America Great Again movement. For a long time, we had to hear, oh, MAGA's a fringe. Don't worry about them. Don't worry about them. The neocons, we still control the party. Now a clear plurality of Republicans are designating themselves as part of the Make America Great Again movement. This tells me that we are winning. We are winning the 80-20 battles. We are winning pretty much everything at this point. So what do we do with that? We continue to push. We continue to push forward. We do not take our foot off the gas all day, nonstop, can't stop, won't stop. Pushing the America First movement, pushing the MAGA agenda. Because every time Democrats are given the opportunity to not be insane, to maybe take pause in their most radical thoughts, every time they are given that opportunity, they fall unbelievably short. And I'm going to show you one of those times in just a second. Before we do that, guys, head on over to loudmajorityusa.com. That's loudmajorityusa.com. Sign up for our newsletter. Check out the shop. We talked about it on Friday, and I'm going to keep it going just for you guys today. Now that we got big number. But we need to show what we are. We need to show people that it is okay to be one of us. It is okay to be a part of the Make America Great Again movement. So everybody who orders anything today off the website, you will get a free Loud Majority USA decal. You can put it on your car. You can put it on your laptop. You can really put it wherever the hell you want. I'm going to be sending that out because it's time for us to make it known that we are now in control of this party. And the people who led us astray for oh so long, the people who lied their way into ridiculous wars, the people, the powers that be, that we have had to capitulate to for so many years, they're done. They're done. And it's time for them to figure out. It's time for them to figure out that we now rule the roost. And it's going to be very hard for a lot of them to grasp that. I want to be clear. There are a lot of entrenched people who have made great careers selling us out and ruling over the ashes. But those days are done. Those days are done with. So anybody who gets one of these, anybody who orders anything today off loudmajorityusa.com will get a free Loud Majority decal with your order. I sent out like 5 today from all of you. Giddy up. Let's go. So, as I said, there are some Democrats out there, some, very few, like count them on one hand Democrats, who can see the light, who may not agree with Trump politically, may not like the policies that are being put forth, but still operate within the real world. And one of them, of course, is Bill Maher. Bill Maher, who some of you don't like when I say this. I've been a fan of Bill's for a very long time. I love his show. I like to laugh. Whatever. He had Don Lemon on his show the other day. Don Lemon, of course, was the guy who you all remember used to be on CNN and then said women were past their prime after they were like 28. That didn't go over very well. And then he got fired. He got fired for being an asshole. Because he is. He's not a very good person. And it turns out even the brass over at CNN did everything they possibly could to get rid of him. Watch Bill Maher make a rather cogent, rather sensible argument about Saturday Night Live essentially saying that all Trump supporters were racist. You saw that, as some of you saw if you watched the SNL 50th anniversary episode. They had Tom Hanks pretending to be a Trump supporter and wouldn't shake Kenan Thompson's hand because he was black. And Bill Maher makes what seems to me to be a fairly cogent argument, and Don Lemon just poo-poos it.
Let me ask you your opinion on this. Saturday Night Live 50th anniversary show. They did one thing, they did a sketch where Tom Hanks puts on a MAGA hat, so he's a Trumper, and then Kenan comes over to shake his hand, and he won't shake his hand.
Yeah.
And I said this on Fareed's show the other day. I found that's so old. You know, I didn't vote for him. I get all the bad things about that administration, but if you think they don't shake black people's hands, it's just you're wrong. That's not who they are. Matt Gaetz shakes black people's hands. You know, Kid Rock will shake your hand. It's just not helpful to like think that half the country that's where they are. That's your
still you're a comedian. You know, it's part of its comedy.
I understand.
But let's be honest. There's a huge faction of the MAGA movement that's really fucking racist.
I wouldn't say huge, no. I'd say
I would
partly.
say huge.
Yeah, okay. Well, we have different perspectives.
I would say huge, and even if they're not, you have to overlook a lot of that in order to support Donald Trump, which I think is maybe even more egregious than just saying I'm a racist.
And that's why one of them is still on TV and the other one is doing man on the street interviews like some kind of college sophomore. Why do I show you this? Why do I show, do any of you actually care what Don Lemon thinks? Not really. I know that. I show you this because they just can't see past their own ignorance. They just can't see past their own blind hatred. And because of that, they're never going to change. And that is why the Democratic Party continues to be asunder, to be underwater with the American people. Because Don Lemon has never been told he's wrong. I've said it numerous times, and I would love to meet Don Lemon. I would love to meet him to remind him that, Don, Trump supporters don't hate you because you're black. We don't hate you because you're gay. We hate you because you're an asshole. That's it. That's all it is. If you were white and gay, we'd hate you for the same reason. Because you're an asshole. And perhaps if you stopped acting in such a way, maybe, just maybe, possibly, you'd still be on television. Instead of, making TikTok selfies like you're, doing the new Kendrick Lamar dance. I don't know. Just saying. Just saying. Guys, it's 2 o'clock. I want to thank everybody so much for tuning in, as always. Once again, guys, head on over to loudmajorityusa.com. Sign up for the newsletter. Check out our shop. That is the best way to support this show and everything we've got going on over here. Anybody who orders anything today will get a free Loud Majority decal in the mail with their order. Giddy up, let's go. I'm happy to give it away. Happy to give it away. Guys, Will Johnson is coming up next. I want to thank everybody so much for tuning in. Hit the thumbs up button on the way out the door, and I will catch you guys back live tomorrow. Until then, everybody, stay loud.